Welcome to the Feeling Lighter podcast. I'm Coach Tyler, as you know. You probably know that by now, right? And this is Dr. Lisa. You should know that too. How are you doing, Dr. Lisa?
I'm doing really well. How are you?
I'm doing good. We were just singing before the episode started. We were laughing about what if we just launched into the episode? Just boom, 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 boom,
We
boom,
might
boom.
lose subscribers.
Or gain them.
That is a good
Yeah,
point.
which, by the way, if you haven't subscribed to our feeds yet, click that subscribe button. Follow us on all the platforms, right? We're trying to grow this podcast so we can get our message of like yourself more and feel a little bit lighter, right,
Yeah.
across. So we don't say that much. So if you guys take a chance right now, follow us, subscribe. That would be incredible.
Yes, thank you.
Otherwise, today is a fun day because we're going to do a little recap what we learned episode over the last few months and the guests that we've had. And this is always fun because I don't know about you, but I see these patterns emerge over and over again. And one of the beautiful parts about having a podcast where you get to interview people on all these different fields is that sometimes you get that knife stuck in the side and it twists us a little bit and then, oh, that one hurt, or maybe that one
Yeah.
felt really like, oh, I got to work on this, right? So
Sure.
I'm sure that throughout some of our insights will be our own personal experiences and ways that we're thinking,
Yeah.
ooh, maybe we take some of these lessons with us and keep growing,
Absolutely.
and hopefully keep feeling lighter, right? Because that's the goal. of
That's
this.
the goal.
Even
That
though
is the goal.
sometimes it feels a little heavy sometimes, right?
It does get heavy when we're trying to feel lighter. You
Yeah.
know, that is the hard part of it. But I don't know. I've really enjoyed this quarter's guests, and I never, want to compare quarter to quarter. But I really felt like this quarter, we just had a lot of excellent people and
Yeah.
a lot of excellent topics. And I mean, we talked about things from medical weight stigma to trauma to, working through, issues in your nervous system to like we did a lot. We talked about diet and diet culture, and everybody, I think for me, dropped a gem that was like personal to me, like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
like, yeah, I need to take that home and digest it a little bit more. So I think it was a really successful, episode or season, I guess, of episodes. So
Yeah.
I'm proud of the work we're getting to do here.
Yeah, me too. And you know what? This slides me right in, and you just said it. One of the first things I wrote down on my list is, man, our healthcare system. Especially for people in larger bodies. It's just, it really, like a lot of these episodes, we talk to medical doctors and patient advocates.
Yeah.
And I just had this moment of like, oh my God, like I come from a family with two parents who are in larger bodies and have been treated like that in the past. And, man, I literally just wanted to cry on a couple episodes just to hear like, hey, I need a knee replacement because my body feels so horrible
Yeah.
that I can't go up and down the stairs and I can't stand up from a chair and my body feels horrible. Oh, you can't do that until you lose weight. But
Yeah.
there's no evidence to suggest that the outcomes are any different from a patient who has lost the weight versus a patient who comes in, skinny, or like the way that we think they should be coming in.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm not plugged in enough to the medical field like you are. Like you've seen this firsthand where you
Yeah.
have clients and patients that come in and they need these surgeries, they need these operations, and they're just treated differently.
Yeah,
they're
they're
treated
treated
like they have
differently.
a sickness and a disease that needs to get fixed before they do that.
And
It's-
they're
it's sad.
treated like it's a sickness and a disease that they created. One, that it's an actual sickness or disease, because there's a whole conversation around how weight should never have been pathologized as a disease, obesity. And I think it's a bad word. I don't even like use the word, but yeah, they're treated as though they have a condition that they're responsible for and that they need to fix in order to get medical care. And one of our guests, it was Reagan this past season, who said that it's you're like holding healthcare hostage. And this weight loss ransom, most people will never be able to pay. That was
Never
so
be able to pay.
impactful.
Yeah.
Because if you think about the logistics of it all, if you're saying you can't have knee surgery because putting you under anesthesia is a high risk, but you can have weight loss surgery, and putting you under anesthesia for that is also a high risk, but it's worth it because you're
Yeah.
going to get smaller.
And that's an actual story from that episode, by the way. She had a
Actual
patient. She's a
story.
patient advocate, had a patient, and then ultimately this patient was approved to go do weight loss surgery, get put under anesthesia, but not approved to
For
like
a joint replacement.
replacement
Yeah.
because of the anesthesia.
Yeah, and it happens all the time.
That's so crazy.
Yeah, so it just reinforces the idea that our healthcare system sucks, and it is very much money driven. It's capitalistic. Insurance companies are Fortune 500 companies, like which makes no sense. My billing specialist, actually, for my practice, she used to work for a major health insurance company, and she said their bonuses were highly determined by how many claims they denied.
Yeah.
So,
well, I don't know about you. If you've ever tried to get a claim pushed through, like I had a knee surgery that wasn't covered, and I had to spend. It took 2 years.
Yeah.
Right. And I have this thought in my head, like maybe they have this number in their head. They're like, oh, if we can get people to try 15 times, they'll quit on number 16 majority of the time.
And they will.
And it's true. And it's like you have to push so damn hard to get them to say, like, oh yeah, like look, you have your knee was destroyed and you need a new one. Okay, great. Like we approve it, you know?
And it's not as if you're applying for benefits that you've never paid into. It's not like, please give me the free money.
No, it's
like
crazy.
You've been giving them money for years and not even having claims, you know? So we live in a very scary time as it relates to healthcare. And I mean, I hate it. And I'm glad that we were able to talk about it. I feel like the more conversation is had around this very unjust system, the more work we can do to sort of dismantle it and hopefully rebuild something better.
You said something big there that I'm like, whoa, I just had a moment where you're like, it's not like you didn't pay into it. Like my medical insurance payment for my family, like I could literally buy a Ferrari. You know, I could have this. It's like the same as a Ferrari car payment, right?
Damn.
But instead, what ends up happening is I get declined my claims and all these different things, right? It's crazy, right? It's so much. And like you're saying, you pay so much into it. And like, do you really get that much out of it? And then we make these excuses. Well, it's catastrophic. Like, what if something happens here? Well, they still probably won't cover most of that. You're still going to get a big old bill in the mail. So it's sad. I think that's really sad. But the episode with Reagan and Asher, those were both really good for that. And Reagan especially, the truth bomb that was dropped on us about the classification of obese or overweight, I think it was.
Yeah.
It was like
1998.
1998. This Weight Watchers former executive or something. Don't quote me on this. Go back and listen to the episode.
Yeah.
Basically convinces the government to classify people as overweight in a different category. Drop the category down.
Yeah.
And I think they said 29 million people overnight instantly enter that category, making it something that we have to address as like a sickness rather than
100%. And then there's a separate committee that actually created the agreement that obesity could be classified as a disease, even though the research participants the people that they asked to research the topic came back with their recommendation to say no, because we can't find any diagnostic scenarios among fat people that makes it, is across the board, makes sense for all these people. And the committee still voted to we're just going to make it a diagnosis. And again, people who are heavily influenced by funding from weight loss interventions and weight loss, surgeries and those things. So, unfortunately, our healthcare system has been co-opted by, big pharma and capitalism, and here we are trying to navigate it.
Here we are. Yeah. So if you're somebody who's been impacted like this, I highly recommend going back and listening to a couple of those episodes. Reagan especially.
Reagan's, and even Chrissy King had some great insight on that. So those were great conversations.
And Reagan specifically had a couple points there where it shared exactly what you need to say and do if you're not getting advocated for. I'm not going to say it because I feel like I'm going to butcher it, and then you're going to go say something, and then the doctor's going to look at you like, "What?"
Yeah.
But if you've been denied claims, if you are struggling with that, please, go learn how to be an advocate for yourself, because there is another way to do this, and you are not broken. You are not broken.
No, the system is broken.
The system is broken. Well, this slides me into another thing that I noticed was a common theme, and this is something that I feel like we should talk about this more, because if you ask the average person on the street, what is health? Like, what makes you healthy and happy? And they're like, oh yeah, eating a good diet and being skinny, or exercise and pushing myself
and weight loss.
Right. Yeah. And I think that, all that stuff is important, right? I think it's great to treat your body nicely. It's great to eat foods that agree with your body. That's all important. But how many other things go into your health and happiness? That's something that I feel like this podcast has really brought up to me over and over again. It's like, you can think that you're going to have the greatest life ever.
Yeah.
But maybe you have, great fitness routine and great nutrition, and you're doing all the things right, and something bad happens. I know 2 people in my life who were extremely fit by the traditional standards,
Yeah.
and they were functional fit and all this stuff that I also appreciate as well. They ate good foods, and they got cancer.
Absolutely.
And they got cancer, and they didn't have any control over that. And both of them are like, whoa. How, like, I thought I was doing everything right. How come this is me? And I think that brings up this like reality that, A, there's more to health and happiness than just exercise and diet. And B,
100%.
regardless of how well you do at all that stuff, you
have
ultimately
no-
don't have control.
Yeah. And the no control piece is we talked about this a lot on the podcast.
It makes me nervous. I can feel it. I got no
it's like,
control. Right?
but it's, we all want control. And we try to get control by any means necessary. And that's why people end up in disordered, eating habits and all types of patterns in their lives that don't really serve them. But it feels safe to have control, especially if you don't feel like, you can put yourself in someone else's hands or in the universe's hands or God's hands, however you see that. It feels like I got to do this. I have to make sure this is right. And if I do, I'll be rewarded. And then that speaks to the morality that we put around people being quote unquote healthy or taking good care of themselves. It's this idea that I've done everything I can do and everything should work out well because I've done all the right things. And then when you're slapped with like, that's not how it works. Some things are random. Some things are genetic. Some things are environmental. And you don't have full control. I don't even think we have 50% control. Like, I think our control is slightly less than that, which is really scary when you're the type of person who wants that control and wants to feel safe and wants to feel like, okay, I got this. I can figure this out. And we just can't. And that doesn't mean like, oh, just give up and, throw everything away and never exercise and eat, whatever. But it's just maintaining a sense of like, I can control what I can control and I can be at peace with the things that I cannot control.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that's a lifelong journey for all of us, but
For sure.
But yeah, it definitely came up a lot this season on the podcast.
Yeah. It's hard to let go. It's hard to let go and say, you know what? I can do these things, right? And then these things, I can't really do much about it.
Yeah.
And life's going to be lifing, like we've talked about a bunch of times, right?
Yeah.
It's big. But that being said, we're talking about this topic of control. And why we often seize control is because we don't feel safe.
Yeah.
And why we don't feel safe
Scared as shit.
is because inside our body, we've got all these patterns that are stored in there, some fears and insecurities and traumas and things like that. And this is another topic that we just like hit on over and over and over again. And I think it's really important because, one of our guests, Vernisha, said it really well. A trauma is when we lose access to our thinking brain.
Yeah, our logical thinking
Our logical thinking brain. And I don't know about you, but I may have this happen to me once or twice a day where I look back after I'm done with a conversation and I go like, whoa, why did I choose that direction?
Right.
And I'm like, well, maybe I didn't choose that direction. I didn't have access to my logical thinking brain.
Yeah, you were surviving.
Yeah, you're surviving. And if I take a moment after every one of those conversations to examine like where did that trigger happen? And what was that, why did that trigger happen? What's the part of me that's still not healed inside? And find that part. Then I can go, and the next time I show up for that conversation, I might be able to notice that trigger. I might be able to recognize why that trigger exists in the first place. And then I might be able to offer myself what I needed to let that trigger go rather than cast it back on someone else, right? And trauma, oh my God. What do you got to say about trauma, girl?
Trauma is... Vernisha was a great guest, and it was funny. Go back and listen to that episode as well, because I know Vernisha personally, and I actually got my trauma-informed certification through her foundation or her institute, and she was just giving very common examples, but she hit a nerve with me during that episode, and I literally cried. I literally cried because she spoke to the traumatized child in me, literally. And it was overwhelming and unexpected. And we didn't even get through like the planned questions, but those are usually the very best conversations. But trauma is so multidimensional. She talked about the 8 dimensions of wellness, which everybody needs to know. So go back and listen to that. She talked about the way we experience trauma through the 3 E's: the event, the experience, and the effect. And it really, the whole concept of trauma being in the body is so counterintuitive intuitive to the way I think we
Yeah.
operate in the
Like,
world.
here, I have a memory that's in my brain.
It's just up here.
My neck up, right?
And I
Like,
can throw it away. I can
yeah.
ignore it and compartmentalize it. But it
No.
literally impacts our bodies. And so that conversation with her was really great. I think also Dr. Denise, we talked
Dr.
really,
Denise,
whew,
Jess had a little bit of
yes,
stuff there.
a lot
She was
about
wonderful
trauma.
too.
This was a traumatic season. It was,
Yeah.
but
I hope that you guys are okay on the other side.
like seriously.
Oh my God.
But trauma work is important, and I think it's only become, more popularized in the last few years.
Yeah.
But I think it's worthy work to sit down and kind of sort through these things, because it impacts like how you show up every single day in all of your scenarios, as a parent, as a partner, as a leader, as a boss, as an employee, as a friend. So yeah, trauma was big this season, and I'm so glad, because it definitely, especially the conversation with Vernisha, made me more aware of things that I do to cope,
Patterns. Yeah.
and the patterns that I hold on to. Even sometimes I know they're not healthy, and sometimes I'm completely unaware. What she brought up during our conversation, completely unaware. Like,
Oh,
just
it's tough when the curtain opens, right? And you're like, oh, there's a part, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, those were great conversations. I'm so glad that we have, this company, We Shape, and we're all about movement and community, intentions, belief, helping each other, giving people consistency and movement to care for themselves. And then we sit down and we don't pretend you're just a body with bones and muscles and connective tissue. That you're a whole human. And we talk about trauma, and we talk about, psychology and things that speak to the wholeness of us. So I'm just so glad that we get to have these conversations and share it with our audience.
Well, it's important. Going back to this like trauma conversation, I feel like it is a buzzword, and there's all this different debates now about people. Oh, it's not real trauma. It doesn't really matter to me. The question is, are you responding to a situation in your life,
Right.
or are you reacting to a situation in your life? A reaction is your brain goes away and you do something, right?
Yeah.
With that knee-jerk reaction, and then we find ourselves, however long, maybe it's quickly, maybe it's like days later, where we realize, wait, that's not how
Or
I wanted
years.
to show up, or years, or never, right? But we want to show up differently,
Yeah.
and so like one of the beginning steps to changing the way that we show up in this world is that desire, right? Like I want to show up differently, and then that cultivates the willingness to build the awareness around these patterns. And then once that's the really hard part, at least in my opinion, in my experience, is when we start to notice the patterns, but we're having a lot of trouble changing them.
Yeah, for
like
sure.
that's a dark part of this journey, because you see.
It's nice to be unaware.
Yeah, it's a unawareness. Yeah, it's kind of nice, right? But then all of a sudden you see your lousy behavior, you see your patterns, you see the dark emotions that you've been packing down your whole entire life, but you're not really sure maybe where they come from. You're not really sure what to do about it. You're not really able to change it in the moment. And then afterwards you're just like, again, and then eventually you find out why that's there. You start to get some reps under your belt of changing that, right? And eventually you start to see those habits change and shift. And then it's like, wow, like now I'm showing up out of choice.
Yeah.
I'm responding
And
to
you're
my life.
healing.
And you're healing.
Healing through
Yeah.
that. So that is
Yeah.
the beauty of it. And Vernisha had a lot of really good gems to share.
Yeah, she was
And
good.
she talked about how we approach, sort of deficits in these areas of our lives and wellness. And she talked about starting where you're kind of already full.
Yeah.
And getting to sort of an abundant state or an
That was big.
overflow.
Let's unpack
That was
that.
so good.
Let's unpack that, right?
Yeah, she talked about the dimensions of wellness, including, physical, mental, emotional, occupational, environmental. There's a couple more,
Financial.
but financial,
Yeah.
yeah. And she just, when people feel like they have a deficit or something, it's about dissatisfaction in these different areas and not having access to the resources that you need. And you asked her, like, how do we begin to sort of, amend that? And she was like, I tell people to start where they have the most.
The greatest strength.
The
yeah.
greatest strength. So start there and almost pour into it more so that you have an abundance and an overflow so that you can then go approach another area, and not an area where you feel like completely depleted, because that process could take longer and be more overwhelming, but maybe an area where you're like half full. And it's like, all right, now let's pour
Yeah.
into this. And so you're sort of starting with an advantage if you think about it. It's like I'm gonna start where I'm good. I'm gonna make sure I got enough and more than enough. And then I'm gonna start where, I'm lacking a little bit. And then maybe I'll go to the next, bucket that's lacking a little bit more. And then I'll get to that empty bucket eventually. But guess what? Now I have an overflow and a surplus of wellness, if you will, in these other areas, these other dimensions, and I can really tackle this thing versus starting where you're completely depleted and never feeling like you're getting it, and then draining your other buckets to try to fill this one.
It's not going to work.
It's not going to work.
It's not going to work.
And even if it does work, it's going to take the rest of your life, because it's a slower grind, So that was eye opening. I think both you and I had epiphanies around that. Like, that is not how we've done things in the past.
Yeah, I feel like I've had that insight for a long time that people need to. There's so much focus on fixing your flaws.
Yeah.
And it's not that I'm advocating for people to not work on that stuff.
Yeah.
It's I think you need to over-index on where you're great.
Where you're great.
And then let that bleed over to those other areas. And then 100%. Recognize like those flaws you may never end up being great at those as you are at the thing that comes really naturally. But it doesn't mean that you can't take some of that energy from that and move it over to those things. But like the opposite, which I think is more important to highlight, which you just touched on, is like if I'm like stuck in patterns in my life and I'm kind of miserable, I'm not taking care of myself, maybe my relationship sucks, I'm going to a job I don't like, maybe the pattern is self-sacrifice. And I'm like having a horrible time. And then I go, I am the worst at doing this. I'm such a horrible person. I self-sacrifice all the time. This is because of this huge problem that happened in my life and blah, blah, blah. It's like, what are we spending our energy on? Yeah. We're spending our energy on the area that we're weakest, and we're basically rehearsing negativity. Yeah. And we're giving fuel to that inner critic, right? And so it's like, how do we see those parts of ourselves that need work? And we love those parts anyways. And we really lean into the parts that are easy to love, and then we just sprinkle a little bit of that love over on those other parts and say, let me just do a little better here, a little better here. And like little bits at a time, right? If I was going to tell you, like, we're standing on the top of a building, right, and there's a street between us and there's another building, I said, go ahead and jump, Lisa. We all going to fall, right? We're not going to be able to make that gap. But if I had you take one step at a time across a bridge, right, now all of a sudden you're going to get it done. And that's exactly what she was advocating for, is like, take baby steps. It's so important to move slow, to not do things that are outside of your nervous system's capacity to be able to handle it. And it's funny, in this moment, you might appreciate this because of your occupation, but I think of the way that we educate movement too. Yeah. And the nervous system functions really similarly, right? If we do too much too fast, what happens? We lose control, everything falls apart, we get injured, pain. Right? And the same thing can happen to you in a mental capacity if you go too far too fast.
100%.
It's about building that strong foundation, taking those baby steps, and that's what really gets people a lot further in the long run.
Yeah, it does. I think we had a lot of really good conversations, and I think one of the areas that we talked to two dietitians this round, and it was Christy and Bonnie, and I found their stances on certain things to just be refreshing and sort of we kind of went a different direction, I think, sometimes.
Because you've been a part of the anti-diet thing for a long time.
Yeah.
And things can feel stale after a while, right?
Yeah, it's like the same things kind of over and over again. But I think they both offered some good perspective around how we look at eating, movement, exercise. And it comes right back to everything that we've talked about. Goes right back to this concern about devaluing ourselves, putting ourselves last, treating ourselves like we're bad or immoral for doing things. I know we had a great conversation about emotional eating with Bonnie and, all of this stuff. And I feel like the common theme always comes back to, accepting yourself, accepting what is, being kind to yourself, being curious, about the things we do versus that attitude of like, oh, I'm so bad. I made a bad decision. I emotionally ate, or I did this thing. Right. Or it's like none of that is ever productive in helping us become better humans or to like ourselves better. They just pull us further away from ourselves. So I appreciate that even the topics that were a little bit more, like I said, dietitian based, they still got to that depth of how we feel about ourselves and how we treat ourselves and how we over moralize healthy, quote unquote, healthy behaviors and things of that nature. So I don't know. We had a lot of standout guests and a lot of standout conversations, and I would say aha moments. So
you said something there that I think is important to touch on, which is like, and we just touch on this, is, we talk about a lot the mindset here. And when we focus on those negative parts of ourselves and we treat it as if like it's a problem, right? We're just giving so much fuel to that.
To that thing,
like
yeah.
so much fuel to that. And I think one of the hardest things in my own journey was to look at the parts of myself that I knew were not serving me.
Yeah.
The selfish parts, the egotistical parts, the parts that would be willing to like walk over people to get what I needed.
Yeah.
And not go, I need to change those parts by changing this behavior, but rather I need to accept that those are a part of me, and I need to love those parts and grieve those dark parts and realize, hey, how can I accept all of myself? And then once the healing is done there, the behavior changes naturally.
Absolutely.
So instead of trying to force yourself to be like, now I'm going to set an alarm reminder to check in with my partner to make sure that she's okay, right? You just go, well, this is happening because I had these traumas that made me feel like my needs weren't met. And so I'm going to grab all my needs and meet them.
Yeah.
And instead, we need to recognize, oh, that pattern is coming from this place.
Yeah.
And if I can give myself the emotional needs that were needed there, the safety, the security, the love, the connection, then all of a sudden I'm not grabbing from everybody else outside of me.
That's, as Katie would say, that's a root thing.
Yeah, a root thing.
That's a get to the root, and then you know, you can clip off all the flowers or the leaves, right? But really, if you get to the root of that issue, what grows after that is going to be much better, much healthier. So, yeah, I totally agree with that. I enjoyed all of these conversations. I don't know. Did you have anybody that stood out for you?
Oh, I had a bunch. I mean, I really liked Jess. She was the softest spoken person that we've had on the show probably ever. But I have been fascinated with language and communication for a long time. And I rarely meet somebody who I feel like selects their words as intentionally as Jess did.
Yeah.
And I by no means am putting myself in that camp, by the way. I just want to be very clear. I'm a little bit impulsive with the way I just kind of blah everything I'm saying.
We all can.
But I really enjoyed that conversation. Vernisha was amazing too. I have one thing I want to say about Vernisha when we wrap this, because I think it was a really great message that I think we all need to hear over and over again. I liked it all. I think it was really, really good. Yeah. How about you? Anybody stand out for you?
I feel biased saying Vernisha because I know her personally, but yeah, she surprised me. I think when you know somebody, you like kind of know what it's going to be, but it wasn't that. So, that was a standout for me, and I was moved emotionally for sure. And also, I think Asher was really good for me. I just, I
feel bad saying a couple guests now that I'm I don't want to nitpick. Like, I feel like everybody had some great gems.
Everybody's great. We didn't have a bad guest. We did not have a bad guest this season. But I just think as far as for where I am, where you are in our personal development, I think some people just, make more of an impact. But, our listeners will find they'll probably have other favorites, but it's about where you are in your journey. So I think Asher was just good at making very complicated medical stuff very plain and simple, and being very no nonsense about like, this is the problem, this is what needs to be changed, and this is what I'm doing. And I really admire people who get a platform and find something that's important to them, whatever it is, and they work that thing. That's what Asher, that's what he's been doing a long time. Same thing with Reagan, Vernisha. I mean, everybody that we had came to their work
felt very purposeful, right? Like they solved their own pain.
Everybody. And it was a personal experience, maybe coupled with their professional training, but everybody was moved to do something different because of what they had experienced. And yes, I really did love Jess. And I think when she talked about the language around like calling your body it versus her or him. She's like, just giving your body a pronoun makes it more important and gives it more respect and more reverence.
It's an object, right?
It's an object.
It is an object, right? Like,
because imagine if you said to a person, it. This
is it. This is it over here. Thanks for pointing out.
Here's it, Tyler. But it's so different. So I learned. That's why I like doing this podcast, because I learned so much about the world, about myself, about different topics. And it just, I don't know, it's like, going to continuing education for a weekend or a week really, and learning about different things that impact how I treat my patients, how I coach my clients, how I treat my children, how I engage in my relationships, and most importantly, how I treat and care for myself. So
speaking of that care for the self, I know that is like ultimately the overarching theme here is how do we get you to have enough self-worth and value yourself enough to really show up and care for yourself and make yourself a priority. You know, one thing that I feel I've heard several times is, and maybe this is a darker way to say it, but like nobody's going to show up and do this for you.
No.
Right?
Nobody's going to save you. That's the dark
I
way.
I want to create like a little bit of a juxtaposition here, because when I hear that, like I remember thinking that too, and it sent me to like a lonelier and darker place in the past. Like nobody's going to do this for you. But there are people that will help you heal and walk you through that.
100%.
Right? And so like that's the key there, is like, can we accept the fact that we're all broken, that we all have pain, we all have traumas, we all get stuck in these patterns, we all neglect ourselves, we all struggle with self-worth, and like feel that, and then look for the people in your community that feel safe. If you don't have a community that makes you feel safe, come check out WeShape, or come, live calls, or listen to the podcast and start developing that community, because you've got to have people that you can go to and say, man, my mom would point fingers at my weight my whole life, and it made me feel horrible about myself, and that's why I'm constantly dieting and doing exercises, and like you can process that mentally, but until somebody like says, hey, it's okay. We're all broken, we love you anyways, and gives you a little bit of that love that you deserved in that moment when you were receiving that negative, painful messaging, like that's how we heal together. But nobody's going to do it for you.
Nobody's going to do it for you. You have to take the steps. You know, you have to notice the thing and decide, you know what, I want to do something about it. But you're 100% right. Community is vital. It's why it's a pillar at WeShape. It's vital to have people around you that support you. And really, sometimes for me, I think it's just the validation of like, yeah, that shit happened.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm sorry that happened to you.
Yeah.
Like that's the biggest thing on my social media when I talk about, you know, people's adverse experiences with like weight stigma, and somebody's like, yes, and they give a whole story. This happened to me when I was this age. All I can say, I don't even know you. I can say, I am so sorry that happened to you. It wasn't okay. You shouldn't have had to deal with it. And I'm here. I can't fix what happened in the past, but just having the simple validation, because a lot of people who go through things, they've never had someone say, I'm sorry that happened to you. They definitely haven't had the person responsible say, I'm sorry I did that to you. So just being able to be like, acknowledge that I believe what you're saying, number one, and I'm sorry that ever happened to you. That is huge. So yeah, community is like one of the secret sauce ingredients to healing, because we cannot heal alone. And I've always heard someone say, you know, you don't heal what you don't reveal. So it's about opening up and being honest about what you've gone through.
There's so much fear in being vulnerable, right? And being honest about that.
Absolutely. And you may have examples in your life where being vulnerable did not pay off for you. So I understand there may be lived experience around that, but you can't really heal the stuff that you don't talk about and open up about to someone. I'm not saying you got to blog about it or talk about it on the podcast, but if you just have one person you can tell, you know, that's vital.
You know, you just brought up a story that I feel like is worth sharing, because I know I've shared my own story on the podcast a lot about being fat shamed and feeling lousy about myself as a kid. And then showing up and going to the gym and getting a chip on my shoulder, and that's kind of what led me down that path in the first place. But what was so interesting was, as I shared this story on the podcast, people don't know, but behind the scenes, Ben is one of my best friends for a long time. I've known Ben since I was 4 years old, right? And he heard me share these stories about being fat shamed by family, friends, you know, et cetera, in elementary school, junior high, and then finally high school, I started to turn things around. And he came to me one day and he said, hey, man, I want to say something to you. I'm sorry if I ever said anything that made you feel negative about yourself. And man, that meant so much to me.
I love that.
That meant so much to me, because like people don't, they think they're joking. They think they're, I'm just kidding, right? When I call you fat boy, right? And you're like, yeah, sure. And you're agreeing because like you don't want to be the oddball out or whatever.
Yeah.
But to have, you're right, to be seen. And I was lucky enough to have someone who participated in that and actually saw me in that moment. And I'm lucky I had let that go already on that side of it. And I'm not holding anything against people like that. But man, it is so healing for someone to say, I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry that happened to you, or I'm really sorry that I was contributing to that. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I think people need more of that. And that's why community is so important for sure.
That is why. That's beautiful.
Yeah. You know, another thing that I wanted to talk about was we got so many people that we get to meet through WeShape that struggle with prioritizing themselves.
Oh, yeah.
And especially women. This is like the world you like are born, and then the moment you're able to talk, it's like, now go be a good little girl and do your chores and go take care of your brother and like, all this stuff. And so it's just like woven into the societal message that as a woman, you're supposed to care for others and take care of business and do all this stuff, right? And it breaks my heart to see so many people who are stuck in that pattern and they can't show up for themselves. And I think it was Jess who I was asking this to. But ultimately I was like, how do we get someone to take that first step? Because sometimes you ask somebody, what do you need? And like, I have no idea. Like, what's preventing you from showing up for yourself? I don't know. I just can't stop saying yes. And one of the things I thought was really great was like, I often think about making a list of your values, right? And she said, I have like a list that I give my people.
Yeah.
And I thought that was beautiful because you could go online and say like, give me a list of like 50 values that would bring a lot of happiness. You could put it in an AI or in Google or something. And then you grab that list. And one of the things that I thought was so cool, and I so agree with this, is grab a Sharpie and start crossing off the things that you don't value.
That don't matter.
Because it's so hard to say, what is my number one value?
Yeah, it is.
And it's so easy to say, I don't care about this. You know what I mean? So if you can eliminate a lot of that list, then you can start getting yourself down to the point where maybe you have like 10 or something like that. They're like, these are really important to me, right? These make me feel good, right? And if for some reason you're in that camp where like maybe you are ready to start taking action towards taking care of yourself, but you don't necessarily know what feels good. We talk about this a lot through our challenge, right? Like, go try things. Be willing to try things. Know that some things you're going to like and some things are going to be neutral and some things you're going to not like. And just be willing to just do the experiences. Like, we get lost in our thoughts trying to solve all of our problems instead of going out and taking action to just experience whether or not we feel like this is the right path to help me solve these problems.
Absolutely. Like, how did it feel? Did you learn something? Did it help with anything? Was it fun? Did you hate it? Like that stuff matters. That those are, those social experiments we put ourselves through, that is important to determine, what matters to us and what's important to us. We literally, when we talk about movement, it's like, I don't know what movement would be fun. Okay, well, let's start at childhood. What was fun as a child? Let's revisit that stuff. Or what have you been thinking about and you are hesitant to try? Let's start there. But I love the value piece. I was talking about how for 2025, I identified like my 3 top, for now, core values. But it started with a big old list. And I did exactly what she said, crossed off stuff that didn't really speak to me. I was like, I don't care about that, and it's fun because it's so autonomous. It's like, it doesn't have to be, my values don't have to be your values, and that's okay. But for me, I identified peace as one of my primary values. Like, I value peace over a lot of other stuff. Like, I want to feel peaceful and be at peace. And I know why. I've had a very, very chaotic few years.
Non-peaceful,
So peace is huge in my home, in my life, in my relationships. The other one was authenticity. And that's important for me because, again, there were times I had to hide parts of who I was or not let my light shine so bright because of the conflict that it created. And I can't live like that anymore. I need to be able to be my full self and recognize parts of myself that I had pushed away from childhood and upbringing. And then the last one was making a difference. And that, obviously just speaks to how I want to show up in the world to help people, but not if it costs me my peace or my authenticity. If those 3 can't work together, then none of them can work. So
I love it. You're giving yourself a roadmap for how you want to live. And it's living more intentionally. And I think why values are so important is because if you just take the word values away and you say, I believe that living a more peaceful life will make me healthier and happier.
Absolutely.
Right? It'll be a better life for me. Then you start to realize that values are either your beliefs or your aspirational beliefs.
Absolutely.
And they're going to guide you because ultimately beliefs drive decisions, drive actions, drive outcomes, right? And I think it's so important for people to spend some time on this, and it's hard to get people to do that, but if you haven't sat down and thought about things that are important to you, then you'll just bounce around aimlessly, and everyone else's values and desires are going to fall on you, and you're going to be saying yes too much, and then you're going to find yourself feeling like you've self-abandoned, right?
Ooh, we talked about that a lot.
Oh yeah, there's a good one here. How about this one? Because we're getting close to the end here, but I heard Vernisha say, people talk about being a people pleaser,
Yeah.
right? And that's so nice, right?
It's
To be
so cute.
you're pleasing other people, right? But what if you called yourself a self-abandoner?
Yeah.
Ooh, who here wants to put that label on themselves?
Nobody.
Nobody.
There's no pride in that.
Ooh, dang. Yeah, but it's the truth, right?
It is
When
the
we
truth.
don't make space for ourselves, it is the same as abandoning ourselves.
100%.
And that's where the values come in. That's where the beliefs come in, the intentions, the baby steps, the pouring into things that you're already doing well, right? The giving yourself
advocating
compassion,
for yourself.
the trauma work, like all the stuff we're talking about, right?
Everything.
Everything. All right, I got one more thing for you. All right, and this is big because I really liked your friend Vernisha. She's got an energy, man. She is glowing beautifully, and it really embodies what I believe as my own philosophy, which is I think that at WeShape, like one of my biggest goals is how can we shine so bright ourselves? Just like I want to love myself, I want to take care of myself, I want to tell other people that they have the permission to do the same thing, and I want to take that light, that fire inside, and just light other candles, right?
Absolutely.
I don't know if anybody out there's religious or not. It doesn't matter to me, but you've probably been to one of those candlelight ceremonies where one candle lights 2 and 2 light 4 and 4 light 8, and all of a sudden the whole place is glowing. And that's so much how I view how we can make an impact on the world.
I want to sing This Little Light of Mine.
Yeah, right.
But that's the vibe.
That's the vibe, right? It's like, and it doesn't start by lighting everyone else's candle when yours is out.
No.
It doesn't work.
You can't even do it that
doesn't
way.
work, right? It starts by lighting your candle, nurturing that flame, making it strong, and then lighting other people's candles, right? And so what Vernisha said was, I used to walk around and I used to think to myself that my purpose was to help others.
Yeah.
And I do think that she's very aware that service does bring happiness. And I want to be very clear about that.
Yeah.
But she said something different. She said, what if instead of serving others, because we can get caught in that trap of not setting boundaries and self-abandonment if our goal is to serve others, what if our goal was to enjoy the experience of our life, right? What if that was our goal, to enjoy our life? It's like if we constantly serving others and we're feeling really negative, our flame is going out.
Yeah.
And we're not able to genuinely spread that love and kindness that we're intending to spread through service.
Yep.
Right? So it's like, how do we enjoy our life? And that means like the service that you're doing needs to be service
Something
that's
you enjoy.
meaningful and that you enjoy.
Not obligatory.
Not
forced.
Not should.
Coming from your heart that speaks to you.
Yeah.
And there's so many ways to serve.
So many ways. So many ways.
Yeah, that was definitely an aha moment. And I just hope y'all listen to every episode because really you're going to miss out on something if you don't.
Yeah, there's some gems there. And ultimately, like, the theme of this podcast is feeling lighter. And we hope that you can learn some new things, shed some old beliefs, and ultimately that all these lessons are helping you genuinely feel lighter, because how you feel about yourself is what really matters, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, with that being said, thanks for listening. Again, make sure you follow and subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. And I'm looking forward to a bunch of new episodes coming up soon that are going to have some new guests that are going to be incredible, just like this last season, right?
Absolutely. They get better and better.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Hope you all have an amazing day. And remember, try to enjoy your life.